There is this concept that is called beating the market. Everyone wants to beat the market. Everyone wants to have better returns than usually what the S&P 500 returns. Usually the S&P 500 is used as a benchmark. Everyone compares the performance against the S&P 500 so as to know if they are basically doing better than the S&P or not. And that's usually a very, very big metric that people are looking at. They're going to look at the S&P like, am I beating the market? And that's going to be a metric to know if it's actually worth investing. But when we look at, for example, the S&P 500 since the beginning of 2021, it has been returning a return of 20%, and the year isn't even finished. So that raises a question, because obviously when you see that in the span of less than a year, you can make 20% on your money. Is it even worth learning about options? Is it worth spending the time listening to a guy with a French accent talking about options? Personally, my answers on this, and I have my point of view that I'm going to share in this video, but I wanted to cover this in this video because this is really a very special time in terms of investing. There has been a lot of new people coming in, regardless if it's in the active investing or passive investing. There is really a lot of things to consider because this is really special times. The market has been returning around 20% since January, and we are in September right now. It's not even the end of the year, and if you had just put, like, let's say, $100,000 in the S&P 500 in January, you would have 120,000 without doing anything. And of course, when you see that people, are spending hours and hundreds of hours learning about options, calls and puts and all those different strategies which seem very complicated, it obviously raises the question of, is it actually worth it? And of course, personally, because I obviously have a channel about options, I would 100%, 1000% say yes. And why? Here's why. It's worth learning about options because you're just not investing in the market passively. You're actually learning a skill. And learning about options and learning about selling calls, selling puts, or whatever it is, whatever you're doing, it's a skill. That's a skill that you learn over time. Yes, it's hard to learn about options. Yes, there's a ton of things to learn. I get that. However, when you invest passively into, for example, the S&P 500, you're bound to where the market is going to go. If it goes up, you're going to make money. If there is a crash, you're going to lose money. If there is a bear market, you're going to lose money. When you invest passively, it's very, black and white. If the market goes up, yes, you're going to make money and it's great, but, a bear market can always happen. And it's not because we haven't had like a bear market for quite a long time that it's not going to happen. It is going to happen in the future. And honestly, it's more a question of when it's going to happen rather than is it going to happen. And when you trade options, when you learn how to properly trade options, when you learn about everything around delta neutrality and how to manage a portfolio, you learn that you can actually make money in both markets, either in a bull market, in a bear market. And of course, this is a very simplistic view, but this is to give you an example that right now, if you have been, for example, investing in the S&P 500 or any other stock that has been rising since, for example, the COVID crash, it's great, it's amazing. However, know that this is not going to last forever. At some point, we are going to enter a bear market. This is not going to end well. So you need to also be mindful about these type of things that, yes, okay, right now we're making money, but what happens if we enter a bear market? How are you going to make your hard-earned money grow in a bear market? Because obviously we're going to start seeing some negative returns at some point. It's not going to be a 20% return year after year forever, or at least if it does for the next 5 years, just a 20% return year after year for 5 years, it's actually quite scary because we know that we are heading towards some very bad things. And that's why for me it's so important to really not necessarily promote like the Wall Street bet and everything that you see online, but more like what is the sound and actually mindful investing and how you can trade options in a proper way so you also make money in both sides of the market. Let's take a very simple example so I can prove my point. Let's say that you invest 100k in, for example, the S&P 500. Well, now your initial portfolio of $100,000 is now worth $85,000, and you have invested your money and now it's just losing money without you doing anything. Yes, you might still earn dividends, and I'm not saying that passive investing is bad, but when you consider that example and another example where you might have some passive investing, but you're trading options with, let's say, $100,000 portfolio where you have both long and short positions, at least you're not going to be as exposed in terms of delta. You're not going to be as long as someone who would be passively invested. And yes, on the short term, you might maybe make less returns, maybe because you don't have as much long exposure as someone who would be passively invested, you might make a bit less money than someone who would put $100,000 in an investment portfolio long stock. Yes, you might make a bit less money, but when the bear market comes, when actually the market starts turning, you're going to make money both sides. You're not going to lose as much money as someone who would be passively invested. And I feel that's the problem with this market right now, because it has been grinding up so much, people forget that the market can actually turn. And of course, right now it's very hard to compete against a market that returns like around 20% year after year. I mean, this is like almost never seen. And of course, it's great when you're in it, but I just want to put a word of caution out there that this is probably going to change at some point. And that's the moment I say that, and maybe for the next 10 years we see a 20% return year after year, but you get my point. My point is, it's not going to last forever, and you need to learn how to manage your own money by yourself and not necessarily be fully depending on, for example, the stock market itself. After that, I'm not saying that you should not invest passively, that you should not hold stocks. I hold stocks myself, and I think this is also a great way to diversify. If you can have like some money into options and also some money into stocks, that's also an amazing diversification, so you can try to have the best of both worlds. However, only having your money into stocks and not spending the time to learn about options might actually be a mistake, because when the tide is going to turn, it's going to hurt. I want to put some context here so as to show my point. What you have in front of you right now is the monthly chart for the S&P 500, for the SPY. What we can see is that the SPY in 2002 was around, let's say, $100 per share. That's the SPY right now, by the way, that I have in front of me. So that's the S&P 500 ETF. What's really, really interesting is that since 2015, basically, the market has been really going up like crazy. And worse than this is that after the COVID crash that you can see in to those red candles, you can see that for like 2-3 months the market went down, but after that we did not only came back to break even, but the market went even further. Actually, we gained 30% since the last high just before the COVID crash. And that's actually quite crazy when you put things in perspective and you look at the SPY, or the S&P 500 is basically the same, but when you look at it on the monthly chart since, for example, 2002, the market has never actually returned that much money than in the last years. And it's important to understand this, because how long is this going to last? How long are we going to be able to sustain this type of returns without having a big bear market coming right at us? And that's crazy, because now we are actually used to hear about like, yeah, of course, a 20% return like on a yearly basis is absolutely normal. Well, that's actually not. Like, usually since actually the last 50 years, the market has been returning on average around 7 to 10% per year. Now we are 20% just, since January 2021, and we are in September. We haven't even finished the year and we are 20%. We did almost triple in terms of return than what the market did on average for the last 50 years. And that's important to understand, that this is not a normal market. This is not going to end well, or at least in my opinion, this is not sustainable. And of course, if you made money and you invested right after the COVID crash, it's amazing. And I was also invested in stocks, and honestly, those are amazing returns. However, I really believe that this is important to know how to at least trade options, both long and short, so as to be able to benefit from both markets, a bull market and a bear market. And yes, maybe if you trade options, you might not beat the market on the short term. However, this is important to understand that if you trade options, if you learn that skill and you're able to do it yourself, you learn how to be independent. You don't need, for example, the market so as to return money. Even if the market stays flat, you will have learned a way to generate positive returns even when the market is actually flat. And that's where learning about options is powerful. And that's why it's quite hard to justify why it's actually worth spending so much time learning about options when you can just put your money in the market and it just grows by 20% every year, or at least in 2020 and 2021. But trust me, it is worth actually learning this, because once you have learned this, once you have learned that skill, you really learn how to become independent. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you should not, for example, have money put into stocks. I think that you definitely should, because first of all, it's a nice way to be diversified, and it's not necessarily the best idea to go all in into options. But you get my point. It's about learning a skill, and once you master that skill and you learn how to make money in both markets, you will be in a much better place than most of the people who will be passively investing their money and who will suffer from bear markets. So that's why I wanted to do a small rant here, because obviously, learning about options and options usually is my passion, but I think it's important to learn about options at least at a basic level, so you can learn how to take advantage of both markets, a bull market and a bear market. And now learning about options is not even like a problem of knowledge anymore, of information. You have plenty of information out there, and even in terms of commissions now, since Robinhood came in the market, the commission just dropped so much. Before, you needed to pay around $10 per contract, like just to trade, and now it's like just $1 per contract. Now the cost of entry dramatically lowered, which allows everyone basically to be able to trade options at a very small cost. So now there's really no excuse to learn about options and at least try to implement those strategies within your portfolio. Even if you continue passively investing, it's always nice to know about that skills and be able to still be able to produce money even in a bear market. That's it for my little rant. I wanted to, make a point, but I thought that this is important because when you look at this chart and you see that the market is just returning 20% since January, this is quite a crazy return, and I'm afraid that this is not going to last. And when the tide is going to turn, it's going to hurt a lot of people. I'm really curious to know what you think about this subject. Do you think that this market is actually going to last? Do you think that we're still going to be able to maintain like a 20% return year after year? Do you think that we're going to face soon a bear market? I'm really curious to know, so don't hesitate to comment it below. I'll be happy to answer any question or any comment that you might have. Please make good and informed decisions. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, I wish you all the best.